Hi, 9 and 4. Welcome to the library in this episode of Podcast of the Realms. I am David, the recorder, and I am joined as always by Carmen.
Hello!
And today, we are going to be covering episodes 5 through 8 of Series 1 of Intro to the Realms. How are you doing today, Carmen?
I'm doing pretty good. I've watched your episodes, and I gotta say, I'm so totally excited because this is really the beginning of the groundwork. And I have questions, as always, YouTubers who are watching. Please put your questions in the comments so that way we can discuss them during these moments. But for the meantime, I have a lot of in-depth, behind-the-scenes questions that we're going to cover today because the episodes 5 and 7 really give us a good idea on what really inspired this entire story. So are you ready to dive into this?
All right. Yes, I am. Suddenly, I am a bit nervous. Okay, let's start off with episode 5, which was our first introduction into the Divine Discussion series, covering the old gods and the misty origins of them.
Yes. So now, as people may not, I can't remember if I said this beforehand or not, but the realms we know was entirely inspired by your D&D sessions with you and your friends.
Correct.
As every good D&D player knows, the DM has created a world for these sessions to begin. And from our conversations that we've had off camera, the episode 5, The Old Gods, you describe as the beginning of their religion and kind of gives me the idea that this is the beginning of the base that you had for these D&D sessions. So I wanted you to kind of touch on the gods that you had described in the episode, but also more so, what was that D&D setup? What was the setting for where this all took place? What was the root of the realms? This is where we begin to see the root.
Okay, yeah. In the early days of the realms actually being explored, played in, like any DM that's just starting to build a world, you start either small, or you start broad but bare.
Mm-hmm.
Either you have a really detailed little area, or you have a framework, a web that you build onto. I went with the web for great portions of the realms. You can see it in the Old Gods, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There were the frameworks of things that were... Oh, of course there's gods of this and that. We hadn't named them yet. They hadn't been explored.
Mm-hmm.
And as much of the creation and filling out of the realms, especially back in these early days, almost anything in the history from during the Age of Valor would be the very formative years.
Mm-hmm.
If, depending on when this releases, we will probably be on part 4 or 5 of our explorations of the Age of Valor, so you'll be able to see. But at this point, you'll notice a lot of the old gods, which would be the gods that were in power at the time of the realm starting, are very... generic's not the right word, tropey. And they were kind of intended as that because it was a brand new world and I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel yet.
Yeah.
At this point, I had only put about 2 years off and on in back work into the background of the realms before we started playing them, and that included an entire rework of the metaphysics. Because the entire concept of Christ
Mm-hmm.
was different before we had started playing. It was, to be honest, I will always go to my grave saying I came up with Matera first, but I don't have the lawyers to fight Squaresoft.
And where's Matera from?
Final Fantasy VII.
For those of you who don't know, go look it up.
Because it came out, Final Fantasy VII comes out. I remember seeing the magazine describing the magic system. I remember throwing the magazine, and the lady that I lived with looked over and went, "What the hell?" And I just went on a tirade at how I had just had my idea stolen. But, so, about 2 years at this point, and the gods weren't really something that had been a focus yet. It was more the story of the recovery of a world from the devastation of chaos.
Yes.
And gods that had, for the most part, been stoic, silent, and unhelping. So, that's you see that with the way the gods are very typical, like fire and destruction, sky and air, earth, creation.
Yeah. One could say it almost replicates like that of the Greek, whatever that is called, but like
Pantheon.
The Greek pantheon. There we go. And just like that is the most common thing to recognize. That is one of the most popular pantheons that's known, just in general in society right now. So it's a really great thing to even just mildly mirror.
It was so good the Romans decided to take it. No, and there's truth to that. So
there's truth.
So we went with basic gods. As is alluded to in the episode, there's the origin of the old gods and stuff is something that will be explored. There is... All I will say is to not ruin too many things of... Gods are like managers. And there's something about managers. There's almost always someone above them.
Oh, lovely. That's exciting.
But beyond the simple pairings, we also had come up with a couple of the racial gods. But again, back at this point, let's see here. The only races that existed on Jam'mR at this point, technically, were your traditional elf, human, half-elf, dwarves, your standard tabletop fantasy races, the Dragwa, the Analar and dragons were already determined to be the elders, but I had beyond super angelic beings of fuck-you-itude. That was basically what the Analar were. They were to be the super bads at the point I originally created them.
Characters being a little bit of murder hobo-y, you encounter an Analar.
Pretty much. But when we started running the game, the first games, which the first ones covered events before the Age of Valor. For example, Sephiron and Catherine Genovan were technically the first actual campaign in Jam'mR. That's why the Foundation of Dragon's Haven was their second adventure when they claimed that fortress.
Oh!
Yeah, now that was a fun... Now, alright. For the really... Okay. Warning. Extreme game dorkiness about to occur. That was being run in 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And because of the way I was ad hocing the rules, as a young DM, that adventure turned out to be a series of the save versus my charm person is a 23. You can't roll a 23, but that's how it adds up. All right. Charm person, behead. Charm person, behead. Charm person, behead. So Dragon's Haven was formed. That does kind of set the tone for how Jam'mR's history is sculpted.
Yeah.
It's the players. It's the players that have contributed to the stories that I have. It's like rolling a ball down a bowling alley.
Yeah.
Where all the players have fire hoses and trying to knock down pins. I can do it sometimes. Sometimes I get knocked down, but not the way I meant to. I'm usually in a lane down there.
And that's actually a great segue into the next episode we're going to talk about, which we're going to skip over to episode 7 real quick, because that talks about the mortal gods. And from kind of what we're understanding is the mortal gods were created from mortals who were elevated to godhood. Now, in D&D standards, what was this?
Okay.
How did that happen?
Well, a slight expansion to the definition of mortal gods for Jam'mR. It is, and as stated in the episode, it is mortals that have been raised to godhood or their direct descendants.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is important because, mortals like to have kids. Mortal gods. Wait till I have the family trees to break out.
Oh.
Yeah. If you are a fan of any medieval European family trees, some of the ones from Jam'mR can rival.
Oh my gosh.
And that's just the divines.
But from the outside perspective, from a person looking into the story, these mortals were the characters that were created during the D&C sessions, right?
Most of them, yes.
Most of them were.
With the exception of going through the episode, the 3 heroes, those are backstory. Those are framework. Those characters were never played. They were historical characters.
They were the history to say, okay, this is the point of the story that we are starting, because the heroes didn't finish their job, as we know from the episode. Correct. Who is going to be there to finish it?
Yeah. So when we start with the Age of Valor and the group known as the Valors, Genevieve, Corin, Damastus, Trinity, Blade, most of these were characters. Yes, Genevieve, Trinity, were characters. Ashtara, Corin, Damastus, and Blade were me at various points. While I do detail that technically at times they were in party together, and it did happen, I tried to avoid being too many voices in a group. We had, at the time, life was chaotic, and sometimes we couldn't get everyone to get together at times because schedules just didn't meet up.
Yeah.
So, we did as we could. But, preview of an episode that will most likely release shortly after this, depending on how long the Valor's talks go. The note of Micah, an infant at the time being raised to godhood. Micah Skychild, third of Genevieve and Corin's children. He hasn't been mentioned in our deeper exploration yet, because he hasn't been born. Everyone who was technically present at the defeat of Vanson by the Valors got raised to godhood. You'll notice Ashtara is not on that list. She wasn't there.
Okay.
The infant Micah happened to be in a magical papoose of protection because my sister found the alliteration hilarious and dropped 300,000 gold to have a papoose of protection +5 for her baby to go fight an elder god. And the baby got godhood.
I guess.
Welcome to the realms. Crazy? That was like 20 years ago.
Oh my god, so the bullshit that these characters brought upon you. Just like as you're creating
on the bullshit scale.
Oh my god. Yeah, I have more questions about that later as we look into the other Vs too.
You will also notice that Blade was not on that list. He is noted as to being elevated later.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot comment any further, even though that most likely this will release after, but just in case. At time of recording, I have not covered some pertinent information that gives that context. So,
to be continued.
To be continued. But that takes care of the Valors. They were all raised up to godhood as recognition of their defeat of Vanson.
Mm-hmm.
While they were fully aware the job wasn't completely done, it was made clear to them due to reasons that it couldn't be completely done yet. It was a job that had to be worn away at.
Yeah.
So, they started doing their godly things in a very direct and personal manner. There's some great stories of the years here that I won't spoil too much, but it may involve an island chain being depopulated of dragons and a certain goddess spending some time in punishment for it. But we'll get
Alright, so moving on next, the Voids.
Mm-hmm. The Voids. This, the original group we had with my sister and our friends, my sister and I ended up moving. Mm-hmm. And as anyone who tries to run tabletop games, moving changes everything.
Absolutely.
But we soon had another group going, and the Voids are what came out of it. They were the first actual group that sat down. We started playing. Mm-hmm. Exedius Windwalker was my neighbor and a great guy. Fucking badass. Mm-hmm. Bionoc Longtool, another good friend. And the great thing about those two gentlemen was they'd never played. They're first-time players. Like, this is something you will find. I have had the luck of happening upon individuals that you would never think would play. That would seriously play. You could go, oh, yeah, they jumped in a game because they walked in and their friends were playing. That makes sense. That's cool. But these people play. They were they were invested. That's why I am invested now. Like, these building blocks of just how much the fact that continuity was so important to it. Mm-hmm. This wasn't like we're just doing Star Trek episodes where, there's a timeline, but we're just having fun. No. They were making changes. They were making plans. At this point, Genevieve was already starting to marry her family around in the Elven court to ensure her family line came to the throne.
Wow,
A,
that's serious character development and dedication.
oh yeah, like this is the voids are the beginning of Jam'mR's favorite response to anything. Escalation. We handle escalations well.
Because we take care of it.
We out accelerate.
Oh my gosh.
So, Ashtar comes back to the fold, joining with the Voids at her mother's insistence.
Oh wow.
Because we also see the beginning of something else within the mortal gods, particularly of Genevieve's line, and there is no child of Genevieve is allowed to kill another. We're not even really allowed to really fight each other.
Oh.
Mostly because the hot-headed ones that would actually do it tend to be planet-killing powerhouses, so clean mess. Yeah, it's...
Don't really want that. That's a lot of democracy you gotta go through. The disappearance of a planet? I don't know. It just kind of exploded.
Well, yeah. But we also have Thanix. Okay. Thanix, Kelix, and Dren, his woodworm, basically his mount, were mine.
Okay.
I had started off that campaign with Thanix, who was just a mana-ree. This is where the lore of Analar being cursed into becoming mana-ree during the 36 seconds, this is where I first inserted that.
Okay.
Because Thanix the mana-ree was, and returned to being, Thanix of the Firstborn. Well, sorry, not the Firstborn, wrong term. The First. He was amongst the first 4 Analar created by the hand of the Nine Wings. He was, and up until his deposement in one of the later ages, was Lord Protector of the Analar.
You guys can't see me, but my jaw is dropped. Oh, that's so cool.
Technically, the man who okayed the Banson project.
Oh my gosh.
At this point, he doesn't remember any of that. His mind, going from being that kind of being to being in just a mortal body, does things to the mind. And he had spent his entire life trying to repent for his sins that he didn't know. By the time, during the adventures of the Voids, there was a bit of temporal displacement, and someone had to stay on an island for like 1,000 years, and Thanix was the one who stayed behind. Because mana-ree are already ageless. So he's like, I'll see you in 1,000 years, I'll hold it down. Because to all his allies' credit, they were torn on trying to figure out who was going to stay until he was like, I'm ageless, remember, I'm a mana-ree. Credit to his kin.
There you go.
But he had his son during that time.
Yeah.
Bard who worshipped Genevieve, goddess of bards. So they went through their adventures, dealt with Vanson, put his ass in the ground,
again,
got elevated to godhood. And then began doing their things.
Yeah.
Bit later, as expected.
The 4th time around, we'll see if this works.
We had the group that ended up becoming known as Victors. I always have to work through it in my head. I love the alliteration of the V's. I started it. That was my thing. I regret it sometimes.
Now, you call them the Victors, but in the video, you use some very descriptive language for their attitude and for how they were in general. If you don't know what we're talking about, go back and watch the video. But
to sum it up, they were us going, oh, we want to play evil. We have a Baylor, a vampire, let's see here, an alien, a succubus. Trying to think if there was anyone else in that campaign that stuck around. There were a couple others, but life was starting to get busy again, so it was... Because one of the things, and this is probably important to note, especially at this point, because it ramps up from here. Like, this is the last sane campaign.
Oh, gosh.
In the forming of the world, like I said, continuity matters.
Mm-hmm.
Which means if Genevieve really wants to jump down and talk to the players and I can't really come up with a reason to stop her...
She's going to.
Yeah, so cross-pollination. Giving... So, we see in this group, evil, selfish, but...
Destructive.
But destructive in a very, very predictable way.
Mm-hmm.
I want more power. Almost all of them, that was their... I want power. I need the world to be running because who's going to give me the power?
Not unlike the kind of world that we see right now, but it's just... That is a predictable way that people do go down this path. And yes, it is inherently evil where it's like, I'm going to go get power. I'm going to take it from you, but I still need you alive so I can continue to take that power.
Well, no. That's amateur. We're talking about the likes of Beathanatus de Dormentave, the Baylor General from one of the pits of chaos.
That's
powerful beyond compare. Do you know his lasting imprint upon the realms that everyone knows of?
Mm-mm.
It's this little casino island called Old Dominion that probably has billions in gold monthly flow through it.
Oh my gosh.
Why force people to give you when you can just
give it themselves?
That's the kind of Machiavellian mindsets we had in this group. The vampire pure evil would go on with the help of Beathanatus, or his mortal moniker, Eddie.
That's so normal.
That's the point. This huge Baylor running around.
Oh, man.
Eddie. I'm Eddie the Baylor. You can't be scared of Eddie the Baylor. Wham!
You gotta learn how to be scared of Eddie the Baylor.
But would go on to create the Necropolis.
Okay.
Which would stand for ages as the center of necromantic evil bullshittery in the realms. And it was run by one of the V's. Because the V's at this point, with the victors added to them, showed the incredible range required for the protection and guidance of Jam'mR. Now, over the years that have passed, all of them have basically died or otherwise disappeared, and there's only a placeholder in holding the spot of victor still open.
Okay.
Because evil does come to poor ends. Because as gray as things can be within the realms, it is kind of important to note on a philosophical structure, there is a thing of the realms as true good, true evil, true chaos, and true law. Just like any fictional work, not only because of the fact it was a game component, but I realized when sitting and crafting the gods and seeing how all these gods are gray as hell.
Yeah.
Like that. There's a few great noble gods where players are like, I'm going to play a pure, kind person and not the random murder hobo. Oh, look, we have a house. Murder adventurer. But the alignments and the concept of having a true base works within the greater framework.
Yeah.
As has been described from the beginning, the realms are a creation of the Nine Wings. And he did make rules. So, for listeners and people taking in the realms, while there is gray, that gray is created because there is a true light and a true dark to blend.
Very
Something
much
to keep in mind. And despite how dark the voids were, they're still gray. Something to keep in mind.
Quick question. Now, I'm assuming that there's probably going to be quite a bit down the line to touch on, or like how you're going to explain the Victor's story. But what was their part in playing the continuation of the destroying of Vincent?
When the way he attempted, because each time he came back, basically the killing of Vincent, like I said, it had to be worn away. More accurately or more detailed, it was shutting off his various paths of escape and bullshittery, and then killing him. Basically, oh look, you're trying to come through this door. Beat him back through the door, break his arm so he can't use that door, seal the door permanently, find the next door until you know you've gotten him to where there's nothing he can pull, and then finish it.
Get big Voldemort vibes from this Vincent dude. Huh. Wonder what it is.
His tenacity was legendary. And he was an embodiment of chaos. Pure, undiluted chaos. Chaos never stops. So, what the victors did in their attempts was basically a purity cleanse of evil in the realms, taking out tainted or collaborating elements. It took out the power structure underneath Vanson's servants, and so they couldn't just run to the black market because no one would deal with them because fuck. I just had a Baylor tell me no.
A reestablishment of who is the evil lord in the area and who is the
much. It was a reminder of what side of the line. Vanson's on the wrong side.
It's like you could almost think of it as like a big gang war almost.
Pretty much. It was what happens in the classical story of gang wars going on, or conflicts where the big bad guy shows up and everyone's just like, I'll fuck you up later. This guy first? This guy first.
I love that.
And one of the things that really helped them in their efforts, and will be gone into detail later, was their contact with an individual who now serves as the steward of the title of victors. The barman, Kalor.
Ooh.
Who also has his fingers in pies.
That's so exciting.
If there's Kool-Aid being stirred, it's probable it's a gnomish finger. Just saying.
Awesome. So now going on to the next people, the last of the V's, which is the Vanquishers.
The last of the mortal god V's. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Vanquishers were like I said, the last campaign, the Victors was the last normal campaign.
Mm-hmm.
This campaign, just looking at the names,
Mm-hmm.
we have Nox, Arya, Justina, Roth, Renly, Karthus, and there were many others in that group. Dumbleduck. The group had 15 people in it the first night and 23 people the third session. It ran between those numbers for about a year and then pared down to about 10 players.
How, as a DM, do you even manage all that many characters?
Very, very carefully, with lots of alcohol, and the fact that, remember that point I said about power blocks with old players and their characters and their gods?
Mm-hmm.
Oh look, a whole bunch of new mortals to have worship us. And players playing the player gods off of each other to get better shit. Like, it was Game of Thrones meta. It was fucking lit. It was great. I never want to do it again, but it was amazing as a creator because,
oh my god,
all these tales and plans.
Yeah.
We see during the Vanquishers the first death of Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
Where Beathanatus' pride was rewarded. And that's all I'm going to say about that because that's a really good story.
Ooh, and I'm assuming that we're going to hear about that later too.
Oh yeah, no. That will get That will get a full description. But what the Vanquishers ended up doing, as they went around with as many people as was in the group, they were able to basically come up with new ideas, a lot of their battle against Vanson ended up boiling down to the verification that all of the other work the others had done was complete and ready.
Okay.
Artifacts that shouldn't have existed reappeared. There were some time shenanigans.
Yeah.
And the Vanquishers worked through all of that, ensuring that the timeline was proper, everything was ready.
Uh-huh.
And then went to fucking work. During this time, there were the servants of the daemon, his last Analarn dragon, his most powerful Analarn dragon servants, and whoever they pulled along laid siege to cities. And at the end of it, after they had defeated Vanson, and as far as the core creature known as Vanson, he died that day. There were parts of him that have been since snuffed out. saying they even came back to existence gives them a little bit too much. A door got opened, everyone sensed what was inside and went, no, in one very loud, high-caliber voice. Like, no.
No, you're not allowed. You stay in your corner. Oh my god.
So, they defeated Vance and then thus got their rewards of godhood. Now, a lot happened during their adventures.
Yeah.
Things such as the reintroduction of the celestial elements, or at least parts of them.
Okay.
Void had been rediscovered. Actually, it was one of the players who came up to me and went, hey, is that a thing in your world? And I'm looking at it, I'm like, because my gut said yes. Which means it exists within the realms, I just have to figure out where the fuck it is.
Yeah.
And the result is the celestial energy of Void.
Nice.
Which soon after spawns the celestial, or not spawns, but soon after they rediscovered the last celestial element, Aether, because they knew about Temporsis.
Yeah.
As the Masters had wielded the staff of Temporsis from
who knows
before. We're roughly about to get there in the story at time of recording. By the time this is released, it's been covered, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
So they rediscovered the celestial elements. They also began a series of initiatives to bring the world up in modernization. You see the creation of Criterion, the Kriston Nation, and their industrial capacity and all that. So the world begins advancing.
Yeah.
And a lot of other stuff not directly related to Vanson happens. There have been children being had. There are alliances being formed. There are incremental steps in attempting to bring the peoples of the realm to the state we find them in today, particularly the Analar. A Analar groundbound by the name of El Bly was also active in this era. Having missed out on reaching godhood, which was never his goal, he had founded a city that would eventually serve as capital of the Analar. And also is famous for founding the path of redemption, basically. That only came after what happens after the Vanquishers became gods. Because at this point, Vanson was dead. But the taint that had spread throughout his servants, which included roughly 85% of the Analar still alive.
Interesting.
Would metastasize.
Metastasize?
Chaos is chaos. It'll take a new form eventually.
Oh, that makes sense.
Thus, the extermination squads were formed. And the
Oh.
Analar were purified. With many of the Vanquishers serving as generals. And Genevieve leading the way.
Oh, gosh.
Her job is to protect Jam'mar from all threats. She takes that job very seriously. It's her only job, actually. Like,
Oh my
as far as
gosh.
she is concerned, that is her only job, is to defend the realm. Did
Okay.
I mention she's the goddess of bandits?
I don't think you have. But I'm going to stop you right there on that point so we can move on to the next episode before you spill more secrets. Um, going back to episode 6, we're going to look. You have given us the common and the elder magic. Very, very, very brief overview.
Mm-hmm.
And you give us different kinds of magics that were, at this point, kind of like the core-ish development of where everything else came from.
Correct. The basic framework to break down the way magic is perceived and thus talked about within the realms. Because you have your classic, and you have your classic 2 magics in most role-playing games. You got your holy magic, you got your booky magic.
Yeah.
Your
summoning
arcane and your divine. Like, this is the parallel. Occasionally you get the 3rd form of magic, which is like psionics or ki or something like that. And those are basically what I use for the realms, because I don't need to reinvent the wheel here to cover, because it's for the purposes of the realms and the way they look at stuff.
Yeah.
Where the power is coming from, as well as why the power is coming, is important. So that's why the difference is made, because that is where, if they're like a ward against a certain type of magic, that's the way they're attacking it or defending it.
Yeah. So instead of going in depth on the hows and whats of the magic, I want to go a little more in depth on the who's of magic, because as we discussed before, we have all these different gods, all of these different characters that were created, and I want to more touch on who are we going to look forward to and what do they use in the magics? Like, who is playing the top magic battle game because they're like the best wizard or something. Like, who are we to look forward to using what?
Well, for the V's that are we talking about in our tales?
Yeah, let's start with our tales, because that's kind of what we've already started exploring if you've listened further than the 8th episode.
Okay. In our tales, for example, Opdor in Sorte, the Praetor, he's a mage.
He's a mage?
Yeah, that's where his interests lie. The fact that he's part of a species of super beings and can fight very, very well as a baseline. He's an intellectual. He's actually a nature book nerd.
Aw.
Yeah,
I did pick that up.
Yeah, that's why he's does what he does. He's an explorer. He wants to explore and discover. He just happens to be a praetor. So you will, but due to his training and some quirks of praetors, he actually uses all 3 types of common magic. He knows how to invoke prayers, pull from his mind, and use arcane. More or less because to him, they're all just parts of the same
thing.
Yeah, it's a worked-in quirk of their metabiology.
Okay.
However, let's see here. Cathian and his brothers are obviously auratics, which is a higher form of magic. Trying to think. LT on Sarge's crew is a arcane mage.
Ooh.
One of the halfling twins on his crew is actually a devotee, I think it would be the correct word, of Trinity and can share her blessings.
Aww.
Blessings.
Yeah.
Trinity is one of the most awesome goddesses in the world. She loves to give gifts. It's just every time she leaves, there seems like less stuff there than she showed up. Don't ask.
Don't ask, don't tell. We don't think too much about it.
As far as psionic magics, we haven't seen any directly within the ongoing tales.
Mm-hmm.
However, out of the gods, you're looking at Damascus being penultimate there. He's literally the god of psionics.
Mm-hmm.
That covers things? I mean, amongst the gods, you have a lot of magic users. Mostly of either divine or arcane, with a good solid smattering of our psionicists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And psionicis is that soul magic, right?
Soul or mind magic.
Okay.
It's a matter of perspective. The important part is where arcane and divine technically rely on an outside force to start the magic. In arcane, it's just, if I shout at this, to make a horrible analogy that hopefully works, if I shout at this fucking volume and wavelength and stuff, that glass will shatter.
Okay.
It's not because my voice has magic powers, it's because of resonance frequencies. That's how arcane tends to work.
Okay.
They're invoking gravity, where magic is the gravity. The divine is obviously the divine
from the gods.
impetus starting it off.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for the soul or mind magics, your psionicists and your monks and your people of that nature, it's from within. Yeah. And that's what the difference is. That's the fundamental understanding of how they interface with the metaphysical. Mm-hmm. So that's the distinction there.
What's your favorite situation where one of your characters in a D&D session was like, hey, yo, can I use this spell to do this? And you're like,
you're okay. The words you are looking for. The words that I am about to utter. To any DM of note, they are about to shudder. Hey, I've been reading. Those words are horror. Generally, it's not that bad. It's cleverness. For example, one of the vanquishers, that unfortunately passed in the God War, I believe. I'm going to have to look. But her player comes up. Hey, looking at this. How much would it cost to make this first level spell, first level caster item? Well, once a day use. Piddly. Okay, I make 20 of them. That's when I knew I had a problem!
No.
First level spell in, question. Magical Aura. Which either adds a fake magic aura or suppresses a magic aura and lasts for 24 hours. And she now had a cleaning rag of hide magic aura. She was a thief!
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That's genius.
Yeah. It was, and the thing was, I did the math, gave it to her, she said to me, and it clicked. And it was like, yep, you got it. Nah, you're fine. There may have been the invention of an automatic dispeller for appraisers, the next generation, and thus the game of the realms continues.
Oh my god, I
The
love
realms, the true secret of the realms, is it's been 20 years of me trying to stay ahead of my insane players and keep the world together with duct tape and force of will. Not sure they've done more to root the world together, but sometimes it feels like they're trying to shatter it.
Sometimes, just sometimes, it feels like somebody's gonna press that nuke button. That's so fucking cool. I am definitely looking forward to seeing more about just the difference of the magic users that we have, and just hearing more of those stories, and more so just like seeing it all play out. Like, this is all has been living in years of your experience, and now as you're sharing it outside of your world, your head, your little group of friends, like, I can't wait to see what happens next. I don't know about you listeners, but I can't wait to see what happens next. I'm so stoked. Like, okay. So we're gonna move on to episode 8, which is Technology Expanded, as well as our first introduction to a character story. First, going over the technology pieces. In the video, you kind of explained how magic and technology were kind of explored and almost interchangeable. Like, they worked hand in hand. One thing could be considered technology on one world, in another it could be considered magic. What I want to look at here is a little bit of a fan base kind of in touch, or insight into just the sight of the characters, as we don't have any previous players with us today. Kind of looking at the different Vs and their different eras, what would you say was the most popular magical technological item in their eras?
Well, because because in the early Vs, we have Chris Tech as a very poorly understood thing, even by the very learned, as we will see in the episodes coming up at time of recording. The machinery and weapons, even usable by the most advanced factions, were tinker toys compared to what the Analar had. So you're looking at these very crude, steampunky, over-engineered just to make them work devices. Whereas in every home in not every home, but like 90% of homes in Jam'mR, they had fireplaces that charged the entire house and ensured you had clean water, hot water, plumbing, food in the pantry.
Wish we had those right now. Honestly,
right?
It fixes a lot of our housing issues.
Well, there is a reason that the realms is so different on a geopolitical level than most people will actually be able to reason. And this isn't a knock on anyone. It is just such a different fundamental from how we as humans know. They haven't had proper food scarcity or base resources scarcity pretty much ever in the realms. Like, those devices in the houses, like 90% of households have them, or some version of it. There is a tent version.
Yeah.
Like, these gifts from the ancients, the things that make this possible, the machines that reproduce these things that were given, were great works of the Analar, some of their finest technologies. But no one actually understood how any of that worked. Even the revivers, who were aware that there was some Chris Tech at play, were still just learning how the alloy process of Chris to minerals to make low resistance wiring worked. Like, where the Analar snapped their fingers and they had the Primo, the rest of the world was slowly working up to understanding that the Primo was actually the same stuff as that big stompy thing trying to carry a cannon.
Wow.
So there's this disparity in understood technology versus in use.
Yeah.
Which has always allowed a very different look on the world. Such as, in our world, we've always valued land because land meant food and resources. If you don't need land for food and resources, why fight over it? Why there's so little warfare in the realms?
Well, at least on that aspect.
Well, the conflicts that happen are conflicts, rarely war, between the powers.
Yeah,
because there's nothing for any of the national big powers to really fight over if it's not territory. Oh, we want that resource you guys have. Well, we have this that you want. If not, we can buy it. Like, they're at the point of warfare making really little sense.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the wild realms and the smaller kingdoms, which some of them do measure their power in territory. And then rapidly find out how that just doesn't financially work when not everyone else is playing that game. Because they'll overexpand and then collapse.
Yeah.
Because no one's really fighting them, so they're like, okay, I'll take all of this, and then they collapse, and then
nobody cares, and it's just
another day in the wild realms. It's a self-correcting system. And those wild realms that raise up to being actual nations get recognized as such.
Okay, you said something that was really interesting to me. The disparity between technology that is understood and the technology that is in constant use. So the way that you've described the Analar, just like imagining something into creation and then like deconstructing it, learning how it works, kind of like that. Obviously, that kind of way of understanding isn't available to everyone. And at the time, I'd say, let's say, between like the victors and a little before that, like that's kind of like in the middle between. How did they deal with that kind of structure as they're learning and developing that technology? But like, how did those who were not the Analar, did the Analar decide to help them? What really was like the position of the Analar and those who decided to further explore the technology?
Well, until the purification of the Analar, they were an antagonist.
Okay.
So, a lot of what the V's did in their campaigns, in their fight against them, would be to steal shit. Several of their sky cities were torn from the skies, the scrap of which was explored over the successive generations.
Yeah.
So you would get a series of bits and parts, and they would figure out how they worked, because one of the big things is, up until a certain point in the Vanquishers efforts, without special steps, the Analar language could not be understood by younger minds. Or as the Analar of the time would say, the lesser races aren't allowed to know.
Oh my gosh.
We are the elder race. We're supposed to shepherd you. Now get back in your goddamn slot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So interesting.
The Analar at this point, the majority of those that had not gone into a form of hiding, which large numbers of them do. When I said like 85%, I was specific to the active Analar, because as we will find out in later stories, that's why it hasn't really come up yet, there were factions that saw bullshit on the horizon early and pieced the fuck out.
Don't blame them.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But so by in the time of the Valors, the disparity was at its largest.
Okay.
So large, in fact, that the fact that Corin's Skychild, Genevieve's husband, was a Christon was something that was generally kept as a secret. Because, especially while they were mortal, because Christons were weapons of the Analar.
And there was that almost racism towards them.
Yeah, it's less racism and more paranoid fear. Because anything the Analar make, if it fights, it destroys. You have to remember they had the stories of both the Rain, only a few thousand years old, and before that, the Wars of Feather and Scale.
Wow.
So, the Analar's power was largely considered untouchable. The only things that could fight them are dragons, and dragons are apparently now way weaker than they used to be anyway. Because the stories of the old dragons where they walked across mountains and laid across oceans. You know, the typical... Even though there were a couple dragons that did that just for fun.
They don't show their faces now, though.
Pretty much. But, so going into the Voids and the Victors, they are beginning to learn the technology. They are beginning to, as they have the generations of the gods behind them, also helping, bending their resources, their understanding, their cred. We see more and more. The biggest help in this would be someone who's already been introduced and revealed. Jackson.
Jackson, yeah.
The Lich at the bottom of the Dragwa home city.
Okay.
First, Jackson. Brother of Thanex. Technically. And creator of the Christons.
Okay.
For a time, Damastus was a Christon.
Okay.
Technically, it's a point of contention whether he still is or not, but he underwent Christon conversion as a childish way to get more power. He needed more power for a reason. I'm not going to say he didn't have his reasons. He needed more power. And he got it. How that works out, we'll find out. But with Jackson obviously being a very, very learned person in Analar technology, Chris Tech, all of that. He can make fake people.
Yeah,
Christons are.
Yeah.
He has found a... Actually, I'm going to puff up Jackson a little bit here because people don't seem to respect him sometimes. He was able to create a mass-manufactured way to create a civilization of people. If he just turned the fucking assembly line on, he could pump out millions of unique individuals every day. If the resource requirement wasn't there.
Say you don't have friends without saying you don't have friends.
No, he had kids, which was a mistake.
I love that, though. That's so cool.
So, he would aid in their understanding while still being cagey.
Yeah.
Because, as was displayed with Dragwa Home City reactivating and being able to tear Sky City from the air in about 3 minutes. Like, it was not a fight.
Yeah.
But as detailed, Dragwa Home City, at its height, was the most advanced military installation ever devised by the Analar.
Oh, wow.
One of their own Sky Cities was a joke, because dragons had Sky Cities too. So, while an overwhelming show of firepower for the time, completely within the strike range of the Dragwa Home City. And they had just discovered this.
Yeah.
And so, as you're getting into the Vanquishers, the Revivers, the group, the clandestine group, had advanced quite a bit, as several of their founding members and high members were luminaries such as people like Genevieve and Damascus and Corinth, and the funding and power that comes from having a group of gods behind you to able... By the time of the Vanquishers, the group had a split within it.
Okay.
The Revivers, who felt it was their job to collate all the advances in technology and ensure that dangerous technologies did not expand too quickly or into the wrong hands.
Okay.
By any means necessary. They had an assassin corps.
I guess that works. Yeah.
With luminaries such as some of the Vanquishers. And then you had the Revealers, a spin-off group that showed up sometime before the Vanquishers actually started.
Okay.
They felt that it was their job to share the advances of technology with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Put everyone on an even frame. If everyone knows how to make Chris guns of this type, everyone knows how to make Chris guns of this type.
Yeah.
The two groups fought often.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say there's a Vanquisher or two that are on that side as well.
Mm-hmm.
Through all of this, bringing it back into the technology, by the end of the Age of the Vanquishers, well, the Age of Valor with the Vanquishers, and the aftermath of their events, the formation of Criterion, the instigation and propagation of the Shadow Mirror conflict, which would have happened by this point, you had not... Jam'mR was no longer rediscovering old technology as the mainstay.
Okay.
Jam'mR was now beginning to innovate.
And make their own technology.
Well, build upon...
what they already know.
Yeah, it's the shoulders of giants thing, literally.
Yeah.
They had finally gotten to a point that because, as I said, the NLR know their technology really well.
Yeah.
But when they snap it into existence, it's what it needs to be. They don't have a real need to innovate.
Yeah.
Good enough with perks is how their stuff generally would come out. Because they would, like, make me a toaster, but as they snap, they're thinking, I'd really like a toaster that will already code it as it pops the toast out with whatever I want, and it'll have that as a feature.
Convenient. Yeah.
But once they have that, they're not going to go, well, I wonder if I could use that toaster system for this, this, and this. The younger races, however, did. So you see the advance of technology beyond the baseline Analar levels.
Okay.
From that point forward. And soon after, only an age or two after, you'd see the beginning of the Age of Stars. And the discovery of some of the very high-end original tech, the Expedit ships and things like that.
Yeah. Fuck yeah, the ships! I'm so excited!
But the thing is even to this day, the homesteader wagons that powered Cathian's house in our tales are, in essence, the exact same design, component designs as when the Analar first came up with the homesteader wagons way back when. Okay. So, when we talk about the different technology, that's kind of where they're working from.
Okay. And speaking of, Canthion is his name?
Canthion, yes.
Canthion. He is Cathion. I'm gonna get it right. Cathion is our first story. The person that we see in the middle of this episode, episode 8, and is the beginning of different story segments in each episode going forward, mostly from this point.
In most episodes.
Yeah, in most episodes. But he is our beginning introduction to some more in-depth characterizations. When you start describing him and like start telling the story, there's not much of a setting. So in the story that you're giving, what is kind of like the setting and the time? Like, where is he coming from and where are we going to be looking forward to?
All right. As far as timing,
Mm-hmm.
let's put a parenthesis around it and call it current.
Current?
There's a few amongst the stories that are being told, amongst the tales, especially for the first, I think it's the first series, I have to look up, but all of these people will eventually be going on a near concurrent timeline with a couple months difference in between them.
Okay.
And this will be at current time. All their stories are the page continuing to turn within the realms.
Okay. That's cool.
So, Cathion's story.
It's our main character.
Cathion is the main character of his line of tale. He goes over how him and his parents had been on a 5-year, basically, pilgrimage and exploration of the realms while they moved somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The reasons for their departure having to do something with a childhood handicap.
Mm-hmm.
Left pretty much alone on that. We meet him as they pull in to begin the final leg of their journey, the great city of Polaron.
Mm-hmm.
And
where is the great city of Polaron?
The great trade city of Polaron is on the eastern edge of the continent of Solaris.
Mm-hmm.
On the southern quarter or third of the peninsula.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, got a geography.
But gets there, his family is getting the last preparations because they're moving out to the lawless lands.
Yeah.
To stake their own claim.
Mm-hmm.
Very Wild Westy
kind of feeling. Exploring the West.
More
Not
going
so much
to
as
take our piece of the West.
Yeah.
And explore and see what comes. Mm-hmm. It might just be a patch of ground that we live on forever and nothing ever happens, and that is fine. Or It might be Adventure City. I give you a hint. It is boring. So we have the introduction of his two brothers. Mm-hmm. The Dragois brothers, Lanson and Jestik. Mm-hmm. Who are, while chronologically the same age as Cathion, due to how Dragois mature and all that, they're basically, to his 10 years old, they're basically the high school senior getting ready to go to college. Okay. They are still considered just under age of majority within their culture, but physically and all that, they're late teen, fully developed, mostly developed as far as physically and mentally. Okay. So, and they truly do feel as if they are brothers. Mostly because Cathion's one of the few that, as we see in the story, is too naive to realize how dumb some of the brave shit he does is.
As we'll see further on down the line.
Exactly. So, we are in current times, a current family going to just find a new piece of land. Going through one of the big Mecca city, he goes to see the sights. They end up having dinner at one of the most famous bars in town, Kalor's Bar, if you're paying attention. And an old gnome decides to play a game with the boy.
Do you want to play a game?
A game of perception.
Herm. I wonder if that'll be important later or something. It's kind of like...
I'm innocent. Hey,
Yeah,
the old gnome
sure.
just wanted to wish happy birthday.
The old gnome decided to wish him a happy birthday.
So they do their stuff in town. He wins his prize from the old man. Ends up being able to afford a Dracon. Sorry, my brain sometimes freezes. Dracons are I'm not actually sure how you would technically define them, as far as they were built with the Dragwa to serve as hall beasts, mounts for allies that can't keep up with them. Think of a Velociraptor with swole arms and the ability to learn how to use weapons. You got an idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. I imagine some giant riding lizard.
Yeah, that's basically what they are. They're extremely fast. They have extremely good senses and acrobatic skills naturally.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. The perfect mount.
Pretty much. War weapons. So we go over their trip from Polaron across the mountains, and then they find their patch of land. And things happen.
Yep.
Now tell me, when things happen, what was your reaction?
Mainly excitement. I am excited to see things get further, but also I'm like, boy. Boy. What are you doing? What are you doing? But he is also like 11 years old. So I imagine the mentality of he is doing everything with the confidence of a 4-year-old in a Batman shirt.
Pretty much.
As that meme goes around, that is exactly the scene that I am thinking of. And I'm like,
now,
yeah.
Give him a rifle twice his height, and you've got the scene.
Yeah.
The fact he hit the first shot. Most likely due to whatever his auratic ability actually is.
Yeah.
As we will discover later, that is his handicap. For some reason, he does not fit within the very comprehensive general classification systems for auratic abilities. And hasn't manifested his abilities in a way consistent with any of them, or really manifested anything beyond the basic fundaments. So,
that's going to be exciting as we explore it further and we hear more of his story. That one thing I just can't like get in my head at this point is like on the timeline of everything else that we've talked about. Let's go back to the V's, because the V's give us a pretty good segment of where and how each and when everything happened.
You're asking where Cathian versus where the V's are?
Yeah, like, is that story, like, a part of it? Because I can't remember if he was part of the names or something, but...
Cathian, the current tales are happening during the Age of Stars.
The Age of Stars, okay.
The Age of Valor is like 3 ages ago.
Okay. Alright, so the Age of Stars. So this, like, so we had the V's, and then...
some
the Age of
stuff,
Stars.
and Age of Stars is current.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, the V, like, there's a lot more that ends up happening with the Vs and the mortal gods and how they, because at first it was an informal recognition of authority.
Mm-hmm.
The older Vs were generally more powerful, and that's just how it went.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually everyone started getting more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And starting to limit out.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where the Valors, most of them actually have broken the typical hierarchy of power by a little bit. They are a tier of God.
Yeah.
But by the time of Cathian, the Court of the Gods is in full existence and running. Okay. They have their internal systems. They have a judge.
Okay.
And godhood can no longer just be obtained.
Mm-hmm.
The entire mechanism for the divine spark has changed. In the interim.
Okay.
That's how a judge can actually enforce his rulings. Mm-hmm. Hasn't happened, but in theory, the judge could strip godhood.
Oh my gosh. That's so interesting.
Well, be self-policing or let other people police you. It was the efforts of one of the gods to come after the Vs who became very fundamental to the realms and how the gods interacted. Eladar the Dreamer. This is way off, but a name to keep an eye out for.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode and look forward to exploring more. So go ahead and leave whatever questions you want me to ask or anything that you guys want more like in depth about. Next episode, we'll go over which ones?
9 through 12? Yeah,
9 through 12. Yep.
Hoping to make these a little bit more regular. I don't want to make a promise as to a time sequence at this point for my perceptive patrons, regular guests, and we will try to get these out more often. Life has been life.
Life is life, and for the moment, we'll get them out when we can.
But I want to thank everyone for your time and your attention. Please leave a like, leave a comment, follow me on Twitter at Master Griffin. Trying to think if there's anything else I'm supposed to shill. I don't know how to do this shill thing. Shill. But thank you.
Comment.
All that aside, thank you very much for listening and watching. And by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other. If you'd like to contribute to the further exploration and explanation of the realms, please consider leaving a comment, a like, and sharing the video around. I read all the comments and make efforts to reply to each. Thank you for helping to grow the channel, and know I look forward to each and every one of your comments. Other methods of support can be found in the channel's description. Thank you for watching.